Hi everyone, this is the first of 5 introductions to the lessons that we'll be covering this semester in law, courts, and politics. First lesson is on American courts in terms of organization and place. And what I want to do in each of these is give you a brief overview, no formal lecture, but just a brief overview of the topics that we'll be covering during the week, and also a brief overview of the assignments. And with any luck, I'll get this done within 5 minutes. So we'll begin by looking at 2 important concepts that we'll be covering this semester: law and courts. I'd also like to note that the textbook has a really interesting feature about thinking about the myths of court versus the realities of court, and that begins in chapter 1 by looking at law. So we'll look at what is law, where does law come from, what are the different types of law, and why do we have laws? And related to that, why do we have courts? In terms of courts, we're going to look at the complex maze of courts that we have in the United States. We have a federal court system. The United States government has a system of courts, and there is a trial court that serves every portion of the United States. Secondly, we have state courts, and some state courts have very simple structures, like this structure in California, which has trial courts called superior courts and 2 levels of appeals courts called the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. Trial courts hear fact, and they try to understand what actually happened, and the job of appeals courts is to review those decisions to ensure that they followed the process as they were supposed to, and that they did things correctly. Some state courts, like New York's courts, are very complicated. And they also give us, these New York courts, a sense of a different way in which courts can be complicated. Because your jurisdiction, your ability to bring a legal matter to court, can be defined by the place that you live. So we see, for example, that courts in New York State, are based on counties, but they could also be based on the kinds of case that you bring. So if you look down here, you see that New York has a system of courts of claims, which are specially created to sue the state of New York when citizens of the state of New York wish to sue the state. So we're going to be looking at law, we're going to be looking at courts and the organization of courts, and then finally, we're going to be looking at trials. As we're going to see, most cases don't go to trial, but some do, and we want to understand some of the details of trials. For example, what's the process of a jury trial? How are juries chosen? How do juries deliberate? Are juries always used in American trials? And where does our right to a jury trial come from? We'll look at all of those this week, this lesson. So what do you have for assignments? As we talked about in the introduction video, there are really 3 types of assignments each week. First of all, there's a quiz that everyone will need to take. It's roughly 25 multiple choice questions based on chapters 1, 4, and 8 in the textbook. Secondly, there'll be 2 online discussion topics, one of them centering around New York State small town courts. Hopefully you haven't been to one, but if you've had, you may have been surprised at what this court looks like. You'll read a series of articles. We'll discuss some of the issues related to it. A second discussion topic for the week involves the roles of juries and the power of juries. And we're going to read a first-person account called An Anatomy of a Verdict of serving on a jury. And secondly, we'll listen to a story, an NPR story, on something called jury nullification, which is interesting. Thirdly, there's a writing assignment, and that too will be based on a reading. Lynn Mathers, The Case of the Fired Football Coach. And you'll be writing on the idea of trial courts making public policy. We often think about policy being made by the United States Supreme Court, but we don't necessarily think about policy being made by trial courts, and I'm going to ask you to do that here. Remember, everybody has to do at least one writing assignment, even to earn a D, but if you wish to earn either a B or an A, you need to successfully complete all 5 writing assignments at a satisfactory level. So you need to get started with writing assignments this week. So it's time to get to work. I'll see you in Slack. I'll see you in Blackboard. If you have any questions about the assignment or the readings or anything, please post a comment or question on Slack, and I'll do my best to get to it as soon as I can. Take care.